I made a video 3 years ago about how many people in Japan were laughing at English voice actors for giving up roles, saying that they don't deserve those roles because they're not the right race, and that sort of rhetoric, which is actually pretty dang racist. I now present to you Praz D, who made the news in a tweet with over 6,700 likes. In a now deleted tweet, he had said, "I got an audition for a prominent cartoon where I was sent just the Asian character. Looking through the rest, I told my agent, hey, I'm happy to read for this, but can I read for some of the others?" To which I was told all of those characters are drawn as white, so no. As mentioned, this sort of rhetoric has been going on for years. For example, back in 2020, this headline, Alison Brie regrets voicing Vietnamese American character on BoJack Horseman. Or more recently, Jameson Price stepping down as Chad from Bleach, due to him saying that he's white and he shouldn't have that role essentially, to which of course many journalists praised. Or more recently, from just this week, a situation involving the voice actress Wendy Lee, the original VA for Yoruichi in Bleach, and Anaris, who was cast as the replacement VA for Yoruichi, replacing Wendy Lee. On Twitter, many people celebrated this change, saying that Yoruichi should be voiced by a black VA and it was the right move. Interestingly enough, Wendy Lee then ended up replacing Anaris and retaining her role, so not sure how that all played out. The whole situation was rather odd. One of the top comments saying, "To be completely sincere, I don't understand this obsession about VA's race matching the character's race. A character's VA should be chosen solely based on how much that voice fits the character. It's literally one of the few picks you could, and maybe should, do blindfolded. If the VA's voice matches the character, I do not care if the VA is white, black, or even green, or if it's male or female, or anything else." That's important context as we return to Praz D, as many people claim that he essentially supported the sort of rhetoric that we've seen, where VAs should only be played by VAs of that same race. People then mocking him for being forced to only have Asian roles and not being able to audition for white roles, given the tweet we saw earlier in the video. A particular clip also getting shared around, which I'll show you in just a moment, although it's also important to keep in mind that Praz D himself is not really the focus of this video. Rather, the focus of the video is the rhetoric itself.
Do you feel like more opportunities would be open to you if you were, a white male, being by what you've seen so far?
I definitely would have more opportunities if I were white, but I think there have been changes in a positive way. I think studios are much more aware of, hey, we should, cast authentically. There have been some good steps. We still have a long way to go.
Other voice actors chiming in, saying why they support that sort of racist and divisive rhetoric, although also trying to say that it's really not racist. For example, this tweet reading, "Why white voice actors should not play characters of color, and why it's not racist to say this." Thread, 1 out of 17, 17 tweets long, and locking their responses. And so, that sort of rhetoric has been backfiring for VAs as they realize that their own casting is going to be limited if they end up enacting the sort of racist protocols that they want. And as we've seen with voice actors, including Praz D, that sort of rhetoric has actually been backfiring on them, limiting their own roles, which they apparently didn't expect. Seems like they really thought they'd have the cake and eat it too. Another great example of that is going back to the Jameson Price situation, because there's a little more to it than what I mentioned earlier on in the video, and perhaps you're familiar with this part. But he actually got backlash for his apparent double standards, because in his announcement where he talked about stepping down as Chad from Bleach because he's not Mexican and Chad is, well, people then asked him if he would continue voicing Asian characters, to which he essentially gave a convoluted response trying to justify why it would be okay for him to continue voicing Asian characters, which just makes the whole thing about stepping down to give the role where it's supposed to be come off extremely fake, like a hollow virtue signal meant to get him publicity and have no sincerity. However, look, I'll remain consistent on what I said 11 months ago when I first talked about that situation. I said I actually support him in stepping down because all too often you see people on Twitter make these sort of statements where they act like they stand for something, but then in reality don't do anything except tweet every now and then. At least this guy actually did step down. Like, he actually took action. I may disagree with his reasoning, and I may point out that I think it's some pretty bad logic for a lot of reasons, but I'll still give him credit for actually doing more than tweet. Now, I've also seen a lot of people mocking these VAs, which I only showed you a handful of. There's been a lot more VAs talking about this stuff than I showed you in this video. And as mentioned, a lot of people have been mocking them. And one of the things I see people say is that they act like Californians. And look, I may live in California, but that's not why I'm about to say what I'm about to say. This is just pure facts. So this actually might shock you because it makes these VAs and these Twitter cops, so to speak, not particularly in this segment talking about Twitter cops, but it still applies in general, it makes them all look even more extreme. Because actually in California, back in 2020, there was an attempt to repeal, specifically it's called Prop 16. It was an attempt to repeal civil rights law that prevents discrimination. And there was a proposal, as mentioned, Prop 16, to repeal that, to essentially allow discrimination. But you know what happened? Californians voted no on that. 57% of Californians voted no on the measure. So not an overwhelming amount, but still, we can say that Californians voted no on that measure. Conversely, you take a look at what these people on Twitter support, and they support that stuff. So let me just point this out. Once again, they're more extreme than the majority of people in California are. And I figured that might blow the mind of some of you guys, you know? Like, that's what we're dealing with when it comes to these people on Twitter. That's the level of extreme we're talking about, where their rhetoric is even rejected by the majority of Californians. And so you get the point. Thank you, as always, so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this segment, and you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you tomorrow for the next one.